Hi, my name's Kelly. Welcome to my channel. If you are new here, this is a space where I like to share my love for sewing. And today I'm going to take you through everything that I made for the month of May. Let's get started. In May, I had a couple of gifts and also a request that I have made for a few different people. One of my makes in May was actually quite a number of small little softies that I've made as a gift for a colleague of mine who has had her first baby. I wanted to make something for this baby that would be quite small in size and colourful and a bit of a sensory toy that I hoped is loved and cherished in the years as they grow up. And I went looking for a free pattern because I was not sure if this is something I would enjoy to make. I've never made softies or plushies before. And I found the Peppermint Patterns Bush Buddies pattern, which has 3 designs. There's a platypus, a kookaburra, and a koala. For the smaller patterns, I put some rattles in the body along with the soft plush stuffing that I used as well, just to make a sensory experience for the baby. On my first try, I found the size of these Bush Buddies patterns to be a little bit fiddly, and I went looking on YouTube and Google and came across another maker who had used the pattern as a starting point, but upsized the pattern pieces to make some bigger plushies. And so I was inspired by her makes to also attempt upsizing the pattern pieces. I made a koala, a kookaburra, and a platypus, all in the larger size. I'm really pleased with how they turned out. Something that I quite enjoyed with this pattern was the ability to use the decorative stitches in my machine to add some additional elements that draw the eye. I also didn't want to do any hand stitching. Hand stitching is not something that I have learnt to do in my sewing at this stage, and I wanted to make sure that the fabric was very secure, as I didn't want it to be a choking hazard or a problem for the baby or young child that I was gifting it to. So I used my sewing machine and decorative stitches to attach the felt eyes and the noses and the bird beak as well. And I also used those stitches to stitch the toes and fingers on the little creatures, as well as the details in the bird wing. So Peppermint Patterns Bush Buddies, I recommend if you haven't ventured into softie sewing. It was quite fun, and it's easy to upsize the pattern as well if you'd like to sew something that is a little larger and less fiddly. I made another gift as well in May, and it is another BF Patterns Bestie Bag. This time I made the medium size, and I used some purple corduroy. This is actually a new fabric for me. I've never sewn with any corduroy before. This time round, I used the webbing as the strap with the bag slider as well, and I'd not tried that before, although I have sewn this pattern a couple of times now. For my third attempt, I did want to try using the webbing, which worked really well with the zipper that I chose. The webbing was black, the bag was purple, and the zipper was black as well with metal teeth. And the webbing and the zipper, just having that color black in a couple of places on the bag, really tied it in and made it more cohesive. One mistake I made in judgment was only buying 1/2 meter of the internal lining fabric, which left me a little bit short on fabric for the pockets. Luckily, I did have something in my stash which coordinated quite well with the lining, and so I was able to use some extra fabric to cut one of the internal pockets and make a contrasting piece. I did leave out the top stitching again, which I've mentioned in the past I found a little bit difficult to do, and the bag is lovely without the top stitching. So I'd recommend that if you struggle getting it through the machine in those tight places. I did use a heavyweight interfacing as well. That was a sew-in interfacing. You can't actually notice from the photos because the way that I stitched it to the main fabric was to stitch in between the plushiness of the corduroy and the lines. While the interfacing is securely attached, it's actually barely visible, and overall the bag's got a really nice look. I would definitely make another one of these bags out of corduroy. I'm so pleased with how this one turned out. The friend that it was gifted to absolutely loved it, and I will definitely see her around carrying this bag, and I hope that she gets a lot of joy from it. In April, one of my colleagues came to me with a request for a top. The pattern itself had a high neckline. It was sleeveless. It had a peplum, and it was not sewn together at the sides. The side seams were open and they had side ties to fasten them. So it's really a layering piece. Immediately, I thought of the Ashton top by Helens Closet, which I have made many times. I made the crop style, and I also removed 5 centimeters from the length of this top because I knew I was adding on a gathered rectangle piece for the peplum. I then made some small, long rectangular pieces, which I folded in half and in half again to make the side ties. And the neckline, the armholes, and the side seams were all bound with Handmade bias binding. Overall, I'm really pleased with the top. It turned out to be a lovely fit on my colleague, and the style itself is a bit boxy and oversized. It's designed to be worn as a layering piece, and turned out really well. The fabric that I used was a navy coloured fancy viscose slub, which has a lot of lovely drape to it. It's quite soft. And I'm sure she's going to get a lot of wear out of this one through winter and also summer. In May, I went straight into making myself a couple more versions of the Collage Gathered top. These versions were both a extra large size, just like the original one that I made, and the long sleeve view. The first one behind me here is a pink and white gingham. The fabric itself is cotton, but the fabric has been woven with these little polka dots that coordinate throughout the fabric. Those polka dots turned out to be a bit of a problem within the fabric because the wrong side has lots of loose, long threads. So you can see what I've been trying to describe. All of those lines are loose threads, and on the outside, or on the right side, they are little polka dots. I'm quite pleased with the top. The gingham will pair quite nicely with something that's a bit more patterned, and I am trying to purposely lean into creating some more pieces that are a bit more neutral and a bit less patterned, so I can coordinate some outfits a little easier. I've seen many versions of the Collage Gathered top on Instagram and online, and I really love the versions where people have used the four pattern pieces as a way of color blocking and print mixing some of their fabrics. And I've wanted to do this for the longest time. But what I did have was enough of the black and white gingham. It is a textured seersucker style fabric. And I also had enough of the black fancy viscose slub in my stash from previous projects that worked well together. For me, it is a neutral. Being black and white, those are two very, very neutral colors for me that I don't really gravitate towards but I'm starting to understand that I need some of these pieces in my wardrobe because I have so many pieces that are very heavily patterned and colorful, and I want something a little bit neutral that's easy to pair together and make a coordinating outfit. I think it's got a little bit of my style given the color blocking that I did with the gingham and the black. And I finished off the cuffs with gingham as well. So I feel like the two different types of fabrics look quite cohesive in this top. That being said, when my husband saw me wearing it, he was very confused. He, at a glance, thought that it was two tops and that I had one over the other like a jacket. And it took him a bit to really understand what I had made there. I rediscovered a piece in my wardrobe that I made a few years back and hadn't worn for quite some time. It's actually the top that I'm wearing now. This is the puff sleeve blouse, and the pattern designer is Nerida Hansen. Unfortunately, you can't purchase this pattern anymore. What I will try and do is find some similar patterns that you are able to purchase. If you really like this style, I'll pop them in the description and you can go and check those out. The puff sleeve blouse is a boxy style top with a slightly A-line fit. It has bust darts and sleeves that finish just below the elbow. These sleeves are gathered into a narrow cuff. The first version is a bust size 16 and waist size 18. Even though my measurements put me at a bust size 20, I knew that there was a lot of ease in this pattern and I purposely decided to size down. After I finished the white version that I made, again, leaning into another neutral, I realized that the bust darts actually sat a little too high for me and needed to be lowered. And I also noticed that the sleeves sit just off my shoulder, so I needed to make an adjustment there as well. The white top was inspired by a sagebrush top that I have in my wardrobe. It's made from a white seersucker, and I've been wearing this a bit as a layering piece under a York pinafore or under a Reynolds dress. And I knew I wanted to make another white top that I could layer in a similar way. I then went on to make a second version of the puff sleeve blouse, this time with a couple of adjustments. The first thing I did was to lower the bust dart 1 inch so it was closer to the fuller part of my bust. And at the armholes, I removed some of the fabric out from the end of the seam at the shoulder because I wanted to bring that shoulder up a little bit and in to make sure the seam did sit where it needed to on me. And those two adjustments, while quite simple, worked well and was just enough for what I needed. The fabric that I chose was actually a tablecloth I purchased from IKEA. And it's a bit of a thicker fabric, similar to a canvas or a drill. And I knew that it would hold the shape of the gathered sleeves really well and bring a bit of drama. So I was really, really happy with how that turned out. And I know it will soften a little bit with wash and wear. That's totally fine. But the print itself being this bold hot pink and red with white in between, and it's really graphic, was something that just instantly attracted my attention. And I knew I had to buy this tablecloth. For my last make, I decided to revisit the bob pants by Style Arc. I was not happy with the fit of the first pair. They ended up being quite oversized on me, and I decided to revisit this pattern with some adjustments that would hopefully make them fit a bit better. I tried on the original pair and I started pinching and pinning some of the fabric out of the side seams to really figure out how much fabric I wanted to remove from the pants. And that's how I was able to determine that sizing down 2 sizes would give me the fit that I was looking for. I made these out of a plain cotton drill. It was quite inexpensive, and so I was happy to take a risk on a second wearable toile. And I'm really pleased with how these pants turned out. I think the fit overall is quite well. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good, and I'm happy with pretty good. I'm not striving for perfection. What I don't like though about this pair of pants is actually the color choice. I'm not sure why I went with this cornflower blue. It reminds me a little bit of the nurses and doctors style scrub pants. It's just right on that color. And so I am not sure that these are going to ever leave the house. I don't like the elastic and waistband construction. I found that quite fiddly, and I felt like I needed 3 hands to do it successfully. So this time around, I went with what I know is my preferred method, which is attaching the waistband to the pants, leaving a gap, and inserting the elastic. And I got that done very, very quickly. It worked out fine. There was no unpicking involved, unlike last time. So I was definitely happier to do that. I haven't done any top stitching on the waistband, but I may on future pairs. Overall, I've had a pretty busy sewing month in May. I have made 2 versions of the Collage Gathered top by Matchy Matchy Sewing Club. I've made 2 versions of the puff sleeve blouse by Nerida Hanson. 1 version of the bob woven pants by Style Arc. I've made a BF Bestie bag as a gift. And of course, the Helens Closet Ashton top hack that I made for my colleague. And I've also made a whole bunch of little softies using the Peppermint Patterns Bush Buddies pattern. If you would like any more details on the patterns that I've used, the sizes that I made, and any adjustments I made, I will include all of that in the description on this video. If you enjoy my sewing content and you want to keep up to date with everything I have been making, please feel free to give me a like on my video and hit that subscribe button, and you'll keep up to date with my next videos when I post them. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!